just in case. I thought I'd mention that. Well, thank you for inviting me. I understand you've moved to Canvas. Here at Indiana, we've moved to Canvas too. So I'm suffering or enjoying the same things that you are, and muddling through. No, Canvas is a better tool than what we had. We had a homegrown tool like you did called On Course. I called it No Course or On Curse. It was called part of the Sakai project, Chef Sakai, which is a famous open source like Moodle. And, you know, they are battleships that run effectively, but we're now in the next generation, and Canvas pushes us into a new generation. What Canvas doesn't do is provide a lot of pedagogical examples of how to use it. They have nice tools, but Canvas hired many computer programmers to build wonderful tools. And so this Tech Variety book can become that place, that space for thinking about pedagogy connected to these technologies. So that's one thing. A blended learning, I guess, is an initiative there at the University of Auckland. And I'm holding up this computer, literally, with a bell. I'm holding this up with a Bible and with the second Bible, my Handbook of Blended Learning. I can talk about blended if you like. There are many models and frameworks for blending in your environments. But think about how to do labs online and everything else face-to-face, or rotating between face-to-face and online, or supplementing class with online tests and quizzes and exams, or readings, or free books. So we can talk about at the end more if you have questions about blended learning, specifically of how to blend and where to blend and what the advantages are. I'm happy to get into that. What this talk will do is be a quick overview of some motivation theory. That is the reason I really wanted Elaine to help, because I have a lazy brain and I needed someone who knew the theory. And so she did finish her PhD with a lot of 500-600 page report full of theories. So since the book came out in 2014 in May, we've had 100,000 downloads, about 90,000 in Chinese. If anyone's of Chinese descent, it's available in Chinese and English. What Elaine may not be aware of is that the person who took my World is Open book and translated it to Arabic is now translating my MOOCs book to Arabic, and the next project that she has is going to be translating this book to Arabic. So we may have an Arabic version of this book soon, and I'm talking to Russians, and I'm talking to people who Spanish can translate to Spanish. So anyhow, this book has gotten some attention, and I'm glad that all of you can have a chance to download it. There are 10, in effect, motivational principles that link together to create the Tech Variety framework. There was a precursor to this book called my Star Wars model, the R2-D2 book, Empowering Online Learning. This book is not free, but it has a model that is a 4-part model for reading, reflecting, displaying, and doing that some people look at as a learning style model. But I'm trained as an educational psychologist. I used to be a CPA or an accountant. Now I'm in instructional technology. And nobody believes in learning styles anymore, per se. We believe in learning preferences. But this is meant to be a problem-solving wheel, moving from reading to reflection to displaying your learning, visualizing to hands-on doing. This book also has 100 ideas in it. So combined, each book has 100, and they each have variations. So in effect, each book has 200 ideas. So there's no shortage of things you can do. I was working on the 3rd of the trilogy, and I gave up. I've decided I'm working on a book I'm calling Education 2020, like 2020 vision, with 20 new roles of the instructor and 20 principles of instruction and ways on how to engage learners, how to create new access, and how to personalize. When I was in Waikato a year and a half ago, I gave a talk on 30 ways that learning is changing. That talk became an article that's free to download on these 30 ways, but there's a precursor to it. When I was in Waikato in 2002, the first time, I gave a talk where I talked about the fact that there was no learning in e-learning, that people were selling smoke and mirrors, but there really wasn't much learning happening. I will send that, what ended up being a blog post, to Elaine. She's got the journal article, but I'll send both to forward to everyone here if you're interested in reading kind of the evolution since my first visit in 2002 to my visit in 2016, I guess that was. and where we are today. So that's a little backdrop for all this. I will say that I try to make things free. There also is a free set of videos, 27 videos on how to teach online that Elaine can also make available to you on how to give feedback, how to manage an online class, how to do blended learning, how to do assessment, how to handle plagiarism, all these things. You can just type in vPortal, V as in Victor, Portal, and my name, and you probably will find it in YouTube somewhere. And I also did a MOOC for Blackboard on how to teach online, the first one Blackboard ever did. So I've got a free class, free book, and free videos. So Elaine said if I said free 3 times, I'd get good evaluations today. So free. So you see the Tech Variety book on the screen there in Chinese and in English. Elaine, you can go to the next slide. And you know, this book really links to intrinsic motivation. The University of Rochester in New York have 2 professors, Edward Deasy and Richard Ryan, who are famous for their intrinsic motivation research and self-determined learning theory. If you get a book by Daniel Pink called Drive, you can read the layman's version of everything. The book is a simple book to read called Drive, and it's very popular here in the States. Daniel Pink used to be the speechwriter for Al Gore. He was also trained as a lawyer. He never took up practice. They didn't allow him to. If you go to his TED Talks, you'll understand what I'm saying. But apparently he wasn't that good of a speechwriter for Al Gore because he lost. So now he's writing books. He has a new book now called When. He has another book called Free Agent Nation and A Whole New Mind and To Sell Is Human. So he's a pretty famous guy, and he'll go through that for you. The next slide, Jerry Brophy on the next slide will talk about, and I see it there, we'll talk about 40 ways in which to motivate people. And Jerry Brophy is a Michigan State professor who passed away in the last couple of years, but he was famous for his motivation theory. And you'll see terms on that list like enthusiasm and feedback and rewards and choice and challenge and meaningfulness. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see our Tech Variety framework is just that. It is those motivational principles reorganized in a mnemonic. And so we're trying to make sense of these different aspects of motivation. If you look at the first one, that one has nothing to do with learning at all, but it has everything to do with learning. I went from 30% drops in my online and blended classes to 0 by adding icebreakers and social interactions. Some would say number 2 is the most important. Just getting some feedback from someone, right, is very critical. And B.F. Skinner, and I used to work with B.F. Skinner's daughter and husband when I was at West Virginia University. They would say feedback's the most important, number 2. Deasy and Ryan would say number 6 and 5 and 6 would be the most important, autonomy and relevance. Piaget would say number 9 is the most important, cognitive dissonance. Other people would say goal-directed learning. Constructivists and constructionists would say number 10 is the most important, building something, having goals, yielding products. Others would say in the gaming literature, number 3 is the most important in the list, and having a fun and fantasy. My point is, all those things are important, but you don't need to do all of them to have an effective class. You need to try embed your course thoughtfully with some of those things. If you go to the next slide, it's just another recap. And again, the download link is just the next slide will give you the download link. It's techvariety.com. You can download by chapter or by the whole book. Download the whole book. Now, the most popular chapter initially was curiosity. And lately, the most popular is the web links at the end. There's also a chapter on helping faculty get support. That's chapter 14. There's a chapter on engagement. So next slide. Again, in there. And you can go to there you go. So in the book, we've tried to detail every strategy from the standpoint of time, risk, and cost. So low risk, low cost, low time. Some strategies are going to be higher risk or higher cost. And as Stephen and I were talking earlier, some things fail. And you either push on or you tweak it and you try something just slightly different. I tell people, try it again. Like I had a Wikibook project with professors in Taiwan and in Korea, Malaysia, and US working together. We just tweaked it slightly and it worked fabulously. I had case-based learning online with people from Finland and the UK and Peru and Korea. And at first, the first semester, not so well, but the next few years, it worked fabulously to getting students to interact around cases of real-world cases that they wrote based on their internships and field experiences and practicum. So many of these ideas in the book, you'll have to tweak a little bit, change a little bit, combine with another idea. The next slide, let's go to some examples of the TEC-VARIETY model. The next slide will get us into number one, which is tone and climate. Now, a tool called Flipgrid was developed in Minnesota, where they talk funny up there, like they're from Fargo or something, you know. My friends in University of Minnesota, they developed Flipgrid. In fact, Flipgrid became so popular, one of them left his tenure job at the University of Minnesota and took $17 million from venture capitalists to build out Flipgrid. It's a video threaded tool. It has a free version and a paid version. There's one free threaded, it's basically you can post a question and have people discuss the question in 2-minute videos, short 30-second videos threaded on topics of interest. It gives students some power, if you will, and you see them. I use it as a conference starter to get people before going to a conference to meet each other in Flipgrid. You can use it as a class starter. The next one is similar. If you go to the next slide, Elaine, and that is having yourself put a video up of what to expect in the class, or today, having students put videos up in Canvas. Canvas has a nice tool for threaded videos. If you've used the discussion forum, you can see media elements in it. You can have an audio response to your students. So if your fingers get sore, you can speak your feedback or do a video feedback for your students. That's a powerful tool in Canvas that's simple to use. Unlike some other tools in Canvas, they're a little harder, but I would recommend trying that one. Again, tone or climate, introductions, telling them what to expect. Next one gets us into encouragement and feedback. So feedback can happen through polls, through surveys like SurveyMonkey and Zoomerang. I built SurveyShare about a decade ago and sold that company. I didn't make the $2 billion that SurveyMonkey is, so I'm still a professor like all of you are, an instructor. But these tools are powerful for collecting real-world data, getting feedback on your students on topics, or having you give feedback to students. So either getting or giving feedback. These polling websites, Poll Everywhere. You can use your mobile devices and have a poll on different topics in your class, and a live stream will come up with the data as you're presenting in a live class. Poll Everywhere will allow you to capture the data from their mobile devices. Go to the next slide. Picaro is a tool which lets you give feedback to your students. You voice it, you speak it, and you get a URL at the end. You send that to the students. Instead of typing it all, you can give feedback that way. So Picaro, Poll Everywhere, Micropoll, all these tools for getting or giving feedback, encouraging them. You can create tutorials with screen capturing tools like Jing, Screencaster. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones that are out there. A whole suite of screencasting tools that are mentioned in the book, and you can go to each chapter, which will have sections on it. There's a section on survey and polling tools with a hot link to them, so you can go right to the tool and check them out. And so these screen capturing tools will let you wear a headset and click on the web, and you can walk your students through something you want them to see or try out, in effect creating a tutorial for them to get them acclimated to something. Next slide. Maps. Geoauthentic maps of the day. So we're into number 3, and that is curiosity, surprise, intrigue. Maps are one way. News is one way to get students excited about something, curious about something, thinking about something. Infographics. Many professors today are putting their syllabus up as an infographic, or a piece of their syllabus as a little infographic. Here you can see the states on the left where marijuana is legal. If you're teaching a course related to pharmaceuticals, it might be something that you're exposing students to. If you teach a political science course, the map on the right on politics in Europe. Next slide will also get us into maps, and that is languages, where easy languages are, what countries are easy to learn, what countries less easy to learn. curiosity. Next slide. The next slide will get us into something very curious, and that is the oldest, this is the oldest picture of a human being in it, with a human being in it. And if you click again, I think you might see a little bigger picture. There's the woman shining the man's shoes in Paris in 1838. And so that, if you're teaching photography or digital media, this photo might get students curious about photography or digital media. Next slide. If you're teaching nutrition or health, this slide might get you into finding out about nutrition. The woman who was the youngest one, the first woman actually to run the Boston Marathon, ran it again last year. And the next slide will give you a woman at age 100 set a marathon, or not a marathon, set a 100-yard dash record last year. The guy on the right-hand side, I think you can see him with the turban on, he ran his last marathon at age 100. He retired in India. He came out of retirement last year at age 104 and ran a marathon. Okay, his whole family had died when he was 80 years old, and he decided to take up running. So if you're teaching fitness, nutrition, health, he could be a poster child for that class. Curiosity. Next slide. This is into dinosaurs, and there's a new dinosaur every day. You can just click through. Yeah, just go ahead and click through. We've got Jar Jar Binks in there. You got the world's largest dinosaur, the longest neck dinosaur, the Savanosaurus, you name it. Every week there's a new one being discovered. So if you teach something about paleontology or archaeology or something, you'll see every week something in the news you might use in your class. I think the next slide gets us to Egypt, where a new discovery was made last month, where they didn't even know there were dinosaurs. They didn't know the climate could have the habitat that could hold enough vegetation for this huge large dinosaur in the desert of the Sahara. So again, intrigue. The Holy Grail of fossils. The next slide will get us into the smallest thing ever discovered, and this is the ancient human ancestor that had a mouth, a big mouth, kind of like the President of the United States today. We've made similar discoveries here. Again, intrigue. Okay, this is the size of a pebble or a piece of sand. Scientists have found that piece of sand had a mouth. My colleague Brian Ford in the UK has shown that he's a microbiologist studying live cells, and he shows that cells, blood cells and whatnot, have mouths and eyeballs and other things. Very interesting research he's doing. He's now writing a book on the intelligence of a single cell. He has a book on the future of meat. He has a book on the secret weapons of Nazi Germany. Fascinating guy, Brian J. Ford. Anyhow, he's my mentor, and he was the head of Mensa in the UK. Next slide. Number 4 gets us into variety. Now, you might have in your classes dice that you throw, and then you decide. What I do in my class, I say, okay, whatever the dice ends up on, we've got the number 5. That will be where we start the agenda. I'll go to number 5 on the agenda, and I start class that day. And I roll the dice again. I got number 9, okay? I'll do number 9 on the agenda. So I'm not teaching the class the same way I've always taught it. What I've done in one of my classes, I've decided to teach the class from the last module back to the first module. I start with the ending recap and work backwards after teaching the class for 20-some years. I'm teaching 20, this is my 29th year, I think. And so I sometimes give a handout to my class and say, let's start with the last item, what I'm expecting for next week, and I'll just work backwards. Well, in that, you see there's a link there to random.org, and random.org has countdown clocks where you give students 99 seconds to make a point or bring in quotes. Have students bring in quotes from the readings. They all get 2 minutes or 99 seconds or 30 seconds, whatever, to make a point. Or I have I use this to randomize who's going to present that day. The students don't think I'm picking on Barbara or Dennis that go first because the computer decided. It's a randomizer that decides. There's a randomization in there. So variety or novelty is an important thing that we all can use in our classes. Just even coming in with some headgear or being a pirate in your class. We're all pirates, right? And so forth and so on. So, I sometimes wear glasses of different kinds. I have my pink glasses, my red glasses, and other kinds of glasses with me. And just a little variety. Well, we can do variety in teaching with technology as well. in our classes. And the random.org website, where you can randomize who's going to present, you can have these clocks that decide how much time people get and all sorts of things, and the dice, flipping coins. The next slide will get us into something also that's fun in games. Now, some of you might have remember Angry Birds. Some of you played Angry Birds in the past, right? Words with Friends, right? So today in classes, one way people blend is by using Jeopardy Rocks as a tool to go through the terms you want students to learn. So I teach psychology of learning, and my students design these Jeopardy Rocks review games in it. And they're free. This is a free tool you can use. Another tool in Thailand last year and in Singapore we used, is a tool called Khoo. It was developed by somebody in Europe, and it's a free tool for quizzing online. And it's very interactive. Everyone can, on their mobile devices, can enter their answers and so forth. And so Kahoot becomes a tool for reviewing concepts and terms and things of that nature. The next slide will get us into another tool we used in Singapore last year at a problem-based learning conference when I was there. It's called Slido. And Slido is a free tool for crowdsourcing students' questions that they might have for a speaker, or their answers and so forth. So Slido has like Flipgrid, has a free version and a paid version, whereas Kahoot is totally free, Jeopardy Rocks is totally free, Picaro is totally free, Jing is free for screen capturing up to 10 minutes. So Slido is a tool we've used in our classes to have students vote on what are the top 3 things that were said today, or what are the top 3 questions we might ask the guest speaker, and things like that in Slido. The next slide will get us into fun and fantasy in the area of virtual worlds, virtual chemistry. And today we know that augmented reality and virtual reality is exploding. And so there are a number of new tools out there to teach, in this case, chemistry and chemical symbols, iron and sodium and so forth, by interacting with it in a virtual space or a virtual world. Google Cardboard lets kids interact in virtual field trips and makes it more fun and lively to visit Gettysburg for studying the Civil War, or visit the Louvre or someplace else. The next slide gets us at autonomy, number 5, autonomy and choice. And that is, one way I use this is to have students enroll in a MOOC. And they, in effect, take 2 classes. They take the MOOC class on psychology of learning and my class. If they write a reflection paper on their course, they can replace one of the midterm assignments. If they finish it, the whole MOOC, and do a reflection paper and get a certificate of completion, they can replace one of their final assignments. And this is very powerful for some self-directed learners. They're learning twice as much content. Next slide. Some of my students say, Dr. Bonk, I don't want to do your glossary, 100-word, too simple. I want to do a multimedia glossary with links to videos that show positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, punishment, shaping, inaction. I want to create links to conferences and books, and my students have done this and created multimedia glossaries. The student from Uzbekistan do it the first time, then a guy from Turkey, live. They were in my face-to-face classes, and they got extra points for doing that. Next slide. Some of my students want to track the life of a scientist. There are bio.com websites, famous women in science websites, computer scientist websites that start them on this journey to track someone and find out a lot of information. Next slide. Number 6 gets us into relevance or meaningfulness. And so for some of us, relevance is a key aspect of learning. And so you see in there pictures of people. I can bring in from this globe people from around the world. This is an upside down globe. Let's turn it right side up. From around the world, I can go to South America, or go over to Australia or New Zealand, or up to Korea. I bring in guests whose articles we're reading every week into my class live. So the guy I think you see on the left there is the guy who designed my course 40 years ago. I brought Dr. Melinda. He's a famous person in educational technology, has a book, Heineck Melinda book, that Elaine might recognize. He comes in to talk to my students on why the course was developed. If you click ahead, he came back. If you click again, you'll see someone else in that class. You'll see me in my pink suit and other things. So if you finally click ahead, you'll finally go ahead and click to Yeah, there's Dr. Melinda. Click again. You click again. That's Thailand I'm presenting to. That's going to Taiwan and Thailand. Click again. You know, all around the world we do these. I'm not sure, I can barely see that, but I think that's case-based learning. So Dr. Mark Braun here at Indiana does pharmacology courses and anatomy courses, and he develops cases that students go through these cases, and they have to solve these medical cases as first and second year medical students. They get blood pressure, they get heart rate and temperature and all sorts of blood tests that have been done, and they get the case of a man with a chest pain, a woman with a lump in her breast, a man with multiple headaches, migraines, and so forth, and then they solve these cases as teams. Next slide gets us back to case-based learning again in a medical field, so virtual learning, virtual world kinds of training can also be done for relevance and meaningful kinds of learning. Next slide. Some of my students today have decided when they become, go ahead, click next slide. Let's see, there we go. Some of my students are the starter for discussions online in Canvas. Some are the wrappers that summarize the discussion. And lately, my students say, I don't want to just start discussion or wrap discussion. I want to create a concept map that summarizes the discussion. So they might go to a concept mapping tool like Glyphy and Mindomo, or in this case, they use some other mind mapping tool to show who's interacting with who and creating a macro structure that supports the discussion. With some tools, you can click on those threads and go right through the discussion. There are tools out there like Poplet that lets you create interactive kind of collaborative knowledge building tools, if you will. Next slide gets us into Wikipedia. At Indiana University, our School of Public and Environmental Affairs have upgraded the Wikipedia sites on public and environmental affairs by having graduate classes do projects on Wikipedia. So here's, this case is students in pharmacology in San Francisco are updating medical websites, Wikipedia pages, if you will, as a class. That's a very relevant and meaningful activity. A decade ago, my students were creating wiki books. They wrote the books and then read the book they wrote. One of my colleagues who taught at Old Dominion University had 300 students in his class. He had students write 100 chapters. He had 3 students write chapter 1, 3 students write chapter 2, 3 write chapter 3, all separately. 3 different chapter 1s, and the students voted on the best chapter 1, and that went in the book. The students voted on the best chapter 2, and that went in the book. He was 70-some years old as a professor, finishing his career doing this really ambitious Wikibook stuff. And he's the guy who created the technique called micro teaching, where students go in a room and they do practice teaching and they record it and then reflect on it. I'm blanking on his name. I'll try and think of his name here. But anyways, wiki books are out, editing Wikipedia pages, having students do a wiki glossary together, writing terms and definitions. I was in Israel, and the Open U of Israel was having students do a glossary as a class, and then that was archived for the next semester. And that got expanded and expanded and expanded. Next slide gets us in number 7, which is interactive and collaborative. I think, Will, is that right? Number 7, okay, that I can't, okay, so this is Pirate Pad and Meeting Words. How many of you use Google Documents? You know, Google Documents was, Google bought Writely. The real name of that tool is Writely. Google bought it, repurposed it, and created the name Google Documents. I don't like Google Documents. I hate passwords. And I hate Gmail. Well, I mean, I'm sorry. But so easier tools than Google Documents are Meeting Words and Pirate Pad. If students want to do an abstract, maybe you're writing a conference with a paper with someone and have to submit an abstract, Meeting Words will let everyone's contribution be a different color. And I had my Pirate Pad up here earlier. So Pirate Pad, my pirate hat. You know, we're all pirates. You're all going to be pirates. You're going to be stealing ideas. That's good. We all should be pirates. Anyhow, those are tools for interactive and collaborative, like little sticky notes on the web. Like next slide, we'll get you to Padlet. I know people in the UK use Padlet a lot. In Canada, they use Padlet. How about New Zealand? You guys have heard of Padlet? Yeah, I thought so. It's a British Commonwealth thing, you know? We don't use it in the, I have heard people now starting to use Padlet in the US. It's sticky notes on the wall with people brainstorming. Next slide gets us into today's meat. I teach a blended class with students online and face-to-face. And the online students can ask questions in today's meet. If there's one tool I'm showing you here today, not that I'm recommending the highest, but if there's one tool that I'm going to say is the easiest of any of these tools to set up, it's today's meet. It will take you 10 seconds. All you have to do is type in the name that you want it to have, and it creates a URL for you. Boom, just like that. And you share it with your students. Your students can have a, what do you call it, back channel chat. You might be teaching face-to-face with online students asking questions like I do, or you might have office hours this way, or you might teach a synchronous class this way. Varies, it varies. But I've, many professors in Indiana use that. Next slide. A top 10 thing that I've ever done in my life, I did this week, I did last night, and that is combining 2 video conferencing systems together. And in 1995, I combined See You, See Me and PictureTell to bring in guest speakers from the University of Michigan and University of Houston. My students hated these people. They had articles on the impact of computer programming on thinking, and my students bashed them in the asynchronous discussion. We brought them in live through PictureTell and See You, See Me, and my students agreed with everything they had to say. It was a mind-changing experience, doing asynchronous first, then synchronous. Bring them in live. It works every time. Well, this is different. This is similar, but it's also a top 10. I brought in a speaker who had no time to present, to design any slides, like what Elaine's doing, clicking for me today. What Elaine could be doing instead is going to all my articles, finding figures for my articles that my students want me to talk about. So my students designed the talk for him. The articles we like, here's quotes. They put quotes in the chat window. They put pictures in the visual frame. And as every image came up, he would comment on them. And this guy was a Twitter expert. He was a social media researcher from the Berkman Institute at Harvard. Then he got a faculty job at Iowa State. And I forget where he is now. But anyways, his name is Ray Junko. And Ray had no time. But he found this to be fascinating. If he didn't want to talk about a topic, he said pass. If he couldn't remember the data, he just said pass. We went to the next one. It was spontaneous, it was interactive, it was collaborative, it was engaging. This was a top 10 winner. If you want to do blended learning, here's a way to do blended learning. You can use Zoom like this, and I love Zoom. Next slide, interactive maps. Again, I like maps. I like globes. I like maps. So here's a map that gets us at diversity in the United States, which our president is facing today. We're trying to stop immigration from our country from happening because the Caucasian population, white population, will be the minority in the near term. As you click through the map, you see from the year 1960 to 2000 to 2060 how diverse, other than Maine and North Dakota, the United States is becoming or will become. And you can pick points of interest in there. You go to the next map, this just came out. That map just came out last week. And that's a map showing where free speech is supported in the United States. And on the left side, you'll see more places in the West Coast and Northwest. I just bought a home in Portland, a condo. It's very liberal. It's very supportive of free speech compared to the South in the US. So it's an interesting map to engage. Another way to engage in the next slide will get you into timelines. Timeline tools here of Steve Jobs' life on a timeline and reflecting on your life. Next slide, we'll go to, just keep clicking there. This is the timeline of Wikipedia on a timeline, or Facebook on a timeline, or Bill Gates' life on a timeline, or Harrison Ford on a timeline. Now, there are tools like Dippity. If you look at top there, Dippity, X Timeline, Time Glider. My students really like Time Glider. I don't know if it's listed there or not. Do we list Time Glider? I think we might, Timeline Curator. Yeah, we're missing Time Glider. Write down Time Glider. I had a student do the history of distance learning in Time Glider. Wonderful tool. Similes out of MIT. It's a little bulky. Dippity is very common. X Timeline and Time Glider. Next slide, we'll get into interactive labs. If you teach biology, chemistry, earth science, physics, and some other disciplines, this has free simulations, and animations from the University of Colorado to teach you about solar energy, or maybe to teach you about time and distance and motion, teach you different principles of physics. That's all available for free, and why not tap into it? Next slide will get us into free chemistry. And so we're in engagement now again, and this crazy-haired professor, so those are the elements. If you click again, this crazy-haired professor from the University of Nottingham has won awards from TED. They've repurposed his videos in TED Ed and chopped them up into small little sequences to teach chemistry with test questions wrapped around them. So TED Ed is taking TED Talks and other things and creating small snippets of videos for free with test questions, short answer, and then multiple choice. Next one. And so here we go to interpreting infographics, and here we're looking on this infographic, looking at how much energy is being spent on creating chocolate bars. There's all sorts of infographics that today that you could be doing climate change kinds of interpretations. Next slide will get us into number 9, and that is challenge or controversy. And so I have my students in my intro class do a point-counterpoint controversy. One student takes a pro side, one takes a con side, and they have to develop a little animation or a video sequence. There are tools out there, and I'm blanking on a couple names, where students can create free animations. You know what I mean, Elaine? Animation, what is it called? Go Animate. Go Animate is one that you can use. Go Animate to create a free animation. There are other tools like that, and they're in the book. And this is very effective for getting students to see both points of view. This is one of their midterm assignments in my intro class. Next slide will get us back to controversy and climate change, I think. Oh, that's just another one there. Click on next one. Click on next one. There were 3. So here we've got climate change. My friend Aaron Daring at Minnesota is the only one I subscribe to in Twitter, and he has project like Earth-ducation, looking at climate change. He has the North of 60 project, looking at cultures north of 60 degrees latitude. He has the Polar Husky project, looking at expeditions at the North and South Pole, and geoauthentic learning, looking at geography around the Louvois or the Golden Gate Bridge. Anyways, he's got this map he put up. Next slide gets us into controversy in science, whether or not we can de-extinct the woolly mammoth or not. Next slide gets us into number 10, and that's goal setting. Students in my class create Facebook pages for my class. That can be the legacy of the class. That can be the rallying point of the class. That can be the place to go to share resources. Or Pinterest. The next slide, my students use Pinterest to put up all the extra tidbit articles, the extra things I put in the class, links to news stories to get them excited about the class that I'm teaching in emerging technologies. And then the next slide, I think you have to click again, and then one more time. Now we get into videos. My students do videos of what they've learned in the class, and they post them to YouTube. So there's various videos that you see there with links, and you can click through those. And then finally, you'll get to a time glider tool. I think you'll see the little, one more maybe. You click again. That might be it. You see the time glide tool in there. And so, yeah, I can barely see the side of the screen, but go ahead and just keep clicking. Those are examples of students' work and from my class. Go ahead, and there you are. So this is the time glider tool, and as you click on different points of the timeline, different information comes up. Timelines, taxonomies, and concept maps are powerful tools from a cognitive standpoint. So I'm trained in cognitive psychology, and when you can encapsulate knowledge in a mind map and a concept map with the macro propositions and the micro propositions, or in a timeline that shows the evolution of thought within the field, you are basically taking the wealth of knowledge and putting it in one space, in one shared space for people to discuss, for people to add to, and so forth. Next slide will get us into, again, more student project-based learning. They create websites in one of my classes. Next slide. Same kind of thing. These are just from a couple weeks ago or 2 months ago in one of my classes. Next slide is the recap of this book. So those are the 10 principles in 45 minutes of the TEC-Variety, less than 45 of the TEC-Variety model. And each one serves a purpose. Next slide is the R2D2 model, read, reflect, display, and do. Each of them are frameworks or models for thinking about how to embed and integrate technology in your classes. Each of them is a guide, not a prescription. Each of them is a way for you to feel less tense about integrating technology in your classes. You can look at this as a problem-solving wheel. You can look at this as something you can start with part 4, and that is doing, and move the other direction. But we start in the book with reading, then reflecting, and there are 25 ideas for each in the book, whereas this book has 10, 10, 10, 10, 10 times the 10 principles, or 100, plus the variations. So that's in a nutshell. Go to the next slide, and that's the ending for comments and questions, and I think we may have some audio if you click ahead.
Let's see what's out there.
Okay. So, engage. You can go ahead and click again, or click backwards, Elaine. You can go ahead and click with the back button, maybe. There you go. So my email is up there. The reason, and then publication shares where my publications are for free. And training has all my talks. So I'll try and put this talk up at Training Share so you can download it after a day or so. I'll get my assistant to put it up at Training Share. Everything I've done or presented in the last 10 years is up in Training Share for free downloading purposes. So
Curt,
let's
we're also available.
rotate this, Elaine. Could you rotate my camera to get the whole audience?
So the slides for the presentations are this short URL.
A little bit more. There you go. That's good. Yep. Great. So thank you, everybody, for coming. I know that in a few hours that you need to leave, so you won't stay more than a few hours because you got to go watch the Olympics, right? So, so do I have any comments from anyone or questions from anyone about TEC-VARIETY, or maybe questions for Elaine about how she can help you with the TEC-VARIETY model?
Is there any questions? I know it's quite a quick rundown of the 100 activities that's in the book. But yeah, please feel free if you've got particular questions. Yeah, there's a question here, Curt. Oh, green specs. Okay.
Go ahead. Your name?
My name's Tanisha. And I was particularly, thank you for that talk. It's invigorating and a bit overwhelming at the same time, isn't it? You're sort of sitting going, oh my God, yes. But I wondered particularly, I've tried to encourage my students, I do quite a lot of blended online learning, and I've tried to encourage my students to create some animations. And I created a really crappy one so that I can always say to them, do better than this, right? So here's where the non-confronting bar is, do better than that. And so I was particularly interested when you mentioned the no anime.
Go anime.
Go anime. That's going to be helpful. Is there? Do you have any more thoughts on the? I've found it very difficult to get my students to engage with that, and I wondered if I should give up or whether I should, if there's. What have you learned there that might save me some time? Mine are medical students.
Yeah. In Canvas, apparently, VoiceThread is integrated in. And VoiceThread is a tool that's been out there for nearly 20 years, but they've upgraded it. And it's a tool for multimedia kind of student presentations, discussions, and things like that. So that's a tool that's listed in here in the book when you go and download it. If you get to page 319, when you download the book or get a copy of the book, there's mind mapping tools are listed in here. Screen capturing tools are listed in here, all on page 319. Word cloud. So I didn't even talk about word clouds and having students, you've seen Wordle probably. How many of you have seen Wordle, right? So my students use Wordle, and then they point out how many times I use the word too much, and they think they're funny in my syllabus. So word cloud tools, video interaction tools like Flipgrid, Vialogs. So page 319 has quite a few of them. I'm trying to find Go Animate, because there are many other tools like Go Animate. But while I'm looking for that, I want to point out that what I showed you are ideas developed over 29 years. I mean, no one does all that stuff. I recommend 1 or 2 new things a semester, and no more than that, because otherwise you're going to overwhelm yourself and you're going to overwhelm your students. My goal in presenting is always to make your brain mushy, because if it gets mushy and overwhelmed a little bit, when you go home tonight and have a glass of wine and watch the Olympics or whatever, you can think about and reflect on some of the ideas and say, oh, maybe the idea of Vaccaro, that might work, or maybe the idea of, students doing video projects, that might work. So different things will work for different people. Page 309 has the screencasting tools in here. Page 309 has the polling tools. And these are all hot linkable. So the timeline tools are in 311. So if you're looking for some of these later or trying to come back, we've tried to create a place that you can find, and as I said, 319 has quite a few. Interactive maps are in 320, and online timeline tools are also 320 and 321. I still haven't found other tools like animation. So there also are documentaries. Students like to do documentaries today. Go ahead. Yeah.
Thanks again. I was actually also wondering about, no, it's gone over here. I'll come back.
Okay, you were fishing for an answer, and here's your fish.
Another question? Yeah, Curt.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Here we go. Hi, Curt.
Uh-huh. If you stand up, I'll see you better, but yeah.
All right, no one else can look at my back. Following up on Tanisha's point, I think one of the challenges we seem to face here is actually how to engage the students to do things differently. So they kind of sometimes come in with a certain expectation that this is what they're going to do. And having taught in the States and New Zealand, I find our students seem less willing to work outside of class. I don't know if that's... Yeah. So I guess maybe how do we motivate them to see that that's actually worthwhile? Like maybe that's... Is that...
Your first name?
Yeah. Yeah.
Your first name is?
Tony.
Yeah. So thanks for the question we asked you to ask us. That was on purpose she asked that. No, I should have planted that question, because really that is the purpose of this book. If you utilize these principles in the back, you'll do what Tom Sawyer did and get someone to paint the picket fence for you. The ultimate goal is for students to do more work at higher levels than previously. So one way to do that is to have a gallery of prior student work, and to have students know that the best of their work will go into that gallery later on. So they will know that those resources will be made available for the next year's students or the year after. So if your department or if your university has a place, a space where you can put content up that showcase things. Now, I got my own homepage recently, and I have an assistant that puts things up. When I ask students, can I put this up in the gallery? So one way is to promote and acknowledge best work. You might give them certificates of best work at the end. So I might have people who get the award for the best project kinds of things, or team projects. Another way is to have team projects. Another way is to do cross teamwork with another institution. So University of Auckland students working with students in Deakin University in Melbourne, or with Indiana University here in Indiana. So cross-institutional projects become a mechanism for students to do more work than less work. Posting their work up online, getting permission, is another technique for them to do more work than less work. Giving them choice. So instead of ever giving everyone the same 4 assignments, and my students would hate me for that, I gave them 10 assignments, pick any 4. They would love me for that, and they would do extra work. Instead of giving them 4 readings to do for the week, I give them 6 or 7. I say pick any 3 or 4. So having some choice, but not too much choice, is another mechanism that wraps right into this book. Case A and Case B. a video case and a text case. Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. It came back to me. I was interested very much in what you were saying about getting the students to develop the Wikipedia pages. And I wondered if others have done that. I know that I've done that and had some success with it. And I'm quite excited about doing that, more of that. I guess there's always that issue of quality. So I wonder what your thoughts are around that.
So let me tell you a couple of things about wikis and Wikipedia, because I did research on it for quite a while. In fact, we got sponsored by the Wikimedia Foundation, Wikipedia people, and I visited their headquarters with my son. You know, Wikipedia only had 10 employees when I visited. It's not General Motors or Sony or LG or anything like that. It's a small shop in the South of Market district. But they're doing wonderful work for the world. And when I did it the first time, it didn't work as well as when we created a scaffold. We created some guidelines. When we made it, here's one point about options. When you do something as drastic as a wiki book project, if you really want students to be involved in it, don't make it optional. So I told you to make things optional, but in some cases we had to make it required, but with a lot of hand-holding, and we had a lab, we went to a computer lab and tried it out. How we did students doing wikibooks first, we had students read an existing wiki book of another class on the same topic and critique it. We wrote critiques. That was a way to dip their toes into a wiki project. We had them look at existing resources and critique them. Then we took them to a lab and had them edit it, just a small little edit. A lot of students didn't want to touch someone else's work. It had no name on it, but they didn't want to touch it. We had them actually physically edit it. And then the third part, we had them write their own chapters. Since doing that, I have the option of adding to that book that my students wrote. We wrote 2 books, actually, in 2 different classes. So you have to either create a job aid or a scaffold. You have to have them do something simple, like editing or critiquing or reflecting on an existing content before you actually go in and tinker with something else. In a social constructivistic learning theory, doesn't happen overnight. You don't automatically move people from passive receptive learners to being active engaged learners. You have to try things so one thing that works of all the ideas in this book, the simplest thing that works is using YouTube videos for me to showcase psychologists like B.F. Skinner or Piaget or Wundt or Dewey or whomever. I have a whole sampling of existing TED Talks and YouTube videos that supplement my classes, that add to my class, that serve as a conceptual anchor. I can use CNN videos or CNN International or the BBC to show a concept in economics or in finance. I used to be an accountant, or in psychology, to get students thinking about today's lecture. So starting with something small and simple, like a short video or an animation or a timeline or an infographic or a news story. Start with something very, very short and simple, like infographics today on, so last night I had a lecture on open education and massive open online, what we call MOOCs. There was a new report yesterday. I took 4 graphs from the new report. I started my lecture with that. The same with a short video. I had a 1-minute video from the University of Pennsylvania that explained it. So the same is true of wikis if you do them. Start with something basic. Don't go full boat right away, unless that's your mission in life. In Indiana, our building was built to be a demonstration site for technology in education. That is our mission. That is our flesh and blood. We have to justify the millions spent. But most places do not do that, okay? Start small, reflect on it, then build on it, share it with colleagues, and then do something more adventurous after trying it out in a small way. Did I answer your question? Okay, other comments or questions?
We probably have time for one more question, if there's any burning questions for Curt.
Any burning questions in the back row?
Kevin.
Someone in the back?
Coming into stream. Yeah, you're in now. Okay. My name's Kevin. No, thanks for
Hey, Kevin.
your talk. I'm curious.
My
about-
first grad student's name's Kevin, so I'll remember you forever.
I'm curious about the relationship between what you're doing online and blended and the effect that it has in the classroom and the patterns that you're seeing in the development of blended more generally, in terms of what's being created online and the impact of the opportunities it's creating in the classroom, and whether you're seeing patterns there that could inform the broad delivery.
So what pieces of the course can we blend and grade, and what might be just things that are there as supplements that students can go to if they want? What are extenders? What are resources that extend beyond the class, and what are pieces that you can put up that become part of the class itself, an expected or somewhat required component? And some people put practice tests up there in either way. Some put them up as, if you take these 9 out of 10 practice quizzes and pass them, you'll get an automatic 20 points. Others take the practice quizzes and tests and put them up before a real face-to-face exam, and to intrigue the students into taking them on their own. I've seen it work both ways. Some people put discussion forums online and have points wrapped around them for participating each week. And some give extra points for leading the discussion in an online forum in Canvas. And so you might allocate the points more for leading the discussion than for participating in the discussion. And sometimes students volunteer when there are no volunteers to be a leader the second time, that recap the articles, post the questions, and they might get 30 points the first time for leading everything and the whole week. And the second time they do it, they might just get a couple bonus points. It won't count as much because they've already earned their 30 points or 20 points for leading the discussion. So I've seen those things as blended components, supplemental resources. You can also have students who contribute supplemental things that they find. So I call the person who finds the supplements the cool resource provider. And they might get 10 points or 20 points for finding an online exam that relate to the content, finding an online animation or a simulation or an online technical report. Everybody signs up once to be the starter for discussion. Everyone signs up once to be the person who finds extra stuff, extra resources that they present in the face-to-face class for 5 minutes to start my class. That creates some variety. They create a handout, or they might have a top 10 list on the board. They get power for 5 minutes. They get fame for 5 minutes. And that 5 minutes of fame gets some identity. They then find resources I can use next time in my class. So I might blend that way by having them find a little bit of extra resources that link to that week's lecture or discussion. Or they might also take my list of videos that go with each week, and they become my assistant and review those videos and point out which ones have gone dead. So sometimes the links go rotten, and they might help me find additional ones. So if you use videos in your class to start your class discussion, I highly recommend that you have backup plans. You always need a backup plan, because sometimes just the access in the room that day, something goes wrong. The internet, believe me, the internet does go down from time to time. So in terms of blended learning, there are different things, tests on the web, extra resources, extra journal articles, special issues of a journal. I'm now using a lot of times, where I tell my students, this week there's a new journal out that covers this topic. If you don't want to read this week's readings, you can read the special journal issue and write a reflection paper on what you learned from that special issue. Or you can write to the editor who organized that special issue and find out what didn't get in the special issue, or where their research is going next, to get them to meet the real world researchers. And maybe if students invite that person in Zoom and we bring that person in, I'll give them some bonus points. So one way to engage students is have them contact those researchers, have them contact that person. In fact, that last night, my students had a poster. My students in the face-to-face class now are doing mini poster sessions, and we rotate. And one had done this article in physics on how students who took the massive open online course in physics all learned something. And I said, well, that's 3 years old. Why don't you write to the author and find out if there's a new article? And they did, and they got a response back immediately. So they're getting engaged in the content that way by contacting that person. I'm not sure if I answered your question fully, but there's many ways to blend and to have some pieces be required, some pieces be bonus points here and there, some pieces be just optional things that people do out of kindness of heart. And you can get that. Students want that 5 minutes of fame in the class and identity. I'm going to have to end there, I think, because we've run out of time. But thank you all for joining me here tonight. Or it's tonight for me. It's 20 to 6. It's morning for all of you. Around noon, almost 11:30, around there or something, I think. Right?
Yep. It's about 11:40 here.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. When do the Olympics start? 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock your time? 5 o'clock?
We get replays.
You get the replays? Okay.
Let's give Curt a huge round of applause.
Thank you all. I appreciate the third chance to come into New Zealand. I'll be there physically in a year and a half or two years from now. I'll be coming. So 2020 for my 2020 book.
Thanks, Curt. Appreciate your help.
Okay, I'm going to leave now if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, bye-bye, everyone. I have emails, so send me notes.
All right, so Elaine's going to be here for a bit more questions. Yeah, you can leave it going on top of the toilet.